Good evening, friends. Welcome to Monk Chat with just one monk, myself. So all the other venerables are currently on retreat. So I am the one taking over the live streams this week. And then in a couple of weeks, you'll have another session with just one monk. Taking over the entire week of live streams. But don't worry, next week we'll have all the monks from Empty Cloud, both giving different Dhamma talks and guiding you in meditation, as well as a full panel of monks for Monk Chat. But today you only have me, so hopefully you won't be too disappointed. All right, so welcome to Gita. He was saying we sent an email to Bhante Sudaso with a link to the life of the Buddha and requested him to share with you. This is an amazing story. Hope you get the opportunity to watch it. Oh, wonderful. Yes. So Bhante will not be checking his email until next Wednesday. So then on Wednesday, I'll make sure to remind him. And welcome to our neighbor Mary, and welcome to the other friends who are watching, and I only see a little dot on the screen. So whenever you're ready, feel free to type in the live chat any question you'd like to ask me, and I'll try my best to answer them. So don't be shy. It can be anything related to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, or close enough to be related to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Hello, Robin. Welcome. Good to see you. And Gita is saying that it is rather long, but very nicely done. So I assume it's a movie, maybe, Life of the Buddha. I'm not quite sure. Here we practice a lot of joy of missing out, hence we are not quite up to date. All right. So you're all very silent. No questions. Which is totally okay. We'll have very, very quick chat this evening. Oh, all right. Welcome to Jay Thurston, who was saying, I'm learning about Buddhism for school, and I have a couple of questions that might seem simple. What does a typical day look like for a monk? Well, feel free to ask any questions you might have. There's no simple question, and there's no hard question. So what does a typical day look for a monk? Well, so monastic life actually gives us a schedule. So we don't really do just what we want to do, so to speak. But rather, we normally join a community and we follow sort of same schedule altogether. In the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, they like to say flowing like a river, which is very much what we're trying to do here. It's not about, oh, I want to wake up at 8 and I want to wake up at 4 and I want to wake up at 7 and I want to wake up at noon or whatever it is, but rather we all wake up at a particular time. Here at this monastery, actually, we have quite a late start at 5 a.m. late start in comparison to other monasteries. And that's because we have live streams in the evening. So, for example, right now it's 7:30 p.m. at the monastery, and we normally finish about 9. So by the time we go to bed, etc., it's not that early anymore. So we wake up at 5, we do meditation and chanting, usually meditation for an hour and chanting for about half an hour or so. And then we have breakfast. Then if it's these days during the pandemic, we have normally live stream in the morning, so where we do Sutta study live. Before the pandemic, we were actually doing it just here for the residents. So we would pick a sutta and start discussing it. But then with the pandemic, we decided to share it a little bit with all our friends online. And then after that, there's normally a work period, and then we have the main meal. So in our tradition, we eat before solar noon. So normally lunch is at 11 a.m. And then after that, in the afternoon, we do meditation and study. And then in the evening, there is either evening puja or there is another live stream like today. But then periodically we go on retreat. So right now, my fellow monastics, as I was saying, are on retreat. So there is pretty much a lot of meditation going on in the morning and in the afternoon and in the evening. And it's about like 8 to 10 hours a day. And then we repeat that for 365 days. And that's how years go by. Isn't that fun? Exciting. And Eleanor is asking, what happens once we manage to stay fully focused on the breath? Enlightenment. Well, how about you stay fully focused on the breath and then you see it for yourself? Too many questions. So you don't have to think too much about these things, but you have to really practice them and see what happens right now when you stay fully focused on the breath. And you can do it. You can do it in every moment, even for 1 second. If that's all that you can do, that's all you can stay fully focused on the breath, what happens? So that's the question that I ask to you. And Gita is sharing information, several episodes. Each episode, 55 episodes. Wow. Big series. All right. And Eleanor is also asking, if I see someone do something wrong like stealing, should I report him, her? Is that the right thing to do? So these are two generic questions. So perhaps you want to ask a more specific question. So what is this person stealing, for example? Are they stealing tomatoes from your yard? Actually, we had this happen at the Rockaway Summer House. So there were our retreat center before in Rockaway Beach was in a low-income neighborhood. And we found a few times neighbors that would come inside the yard and steal tomatoes. So would the appropriate thing to do there would to report them? Not really. That's not what we thought. We didn't think that was actually necessary. What we were concerned about was the fact that these people were making bad karma by stealing, but they were doing so out of necessity. So what instead we did was we did two things. One was to actually put a sign saying that we were going to give food away, so for free distribution every week at a particular time, from this time to this time, and that people were welcome to show up. And another time was to approach one of the people as we saw them and just ask them if they needed something. And inviting them to come and ask us next time if they needed some tomatoes. And as a community, we decided that that was the appropriate response because it was for the welfare of the people there who were feeling like we actually cared about them, rather than performing some kind of arbitrary punishment that only creates the conditions for resentment in the person and for a lot of further sort of unwholesome conditions that one needs to then overcome. So I'm not terribly like a believer of punishment, but rather as a first choice anyway, but rather to see how can we help others, and also trying to understand why are they doing something unwholesome in the first place. Sometimes there is a reason, like in this case, perhaps hunger or inability of having enough, right? That then when we start understanding these causes and conditions, we can become more compassionate. We're like, well, actually, these people need tomatoes more than I do, right? And Gita is asking if there are any Bhikkhuni female monasteries in the US. Absolutely, yes. Actually, there are quite a few. I think that the US is after Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has actually thousands of Bhikkhunis that I'm aware of these days. But in the US, there are several in the West Coast. So in California in particular, you'll find Damadarini Monastery, founded by Venerable Ayya Tattaloka, who is not the most senior, one of the most senior Western Bhikkhunis, ordained in the Theravada tradition. And they also have a hermitage called Aranya Bodhi. And that's close to Abhayagiri Monastery, so in the sort of up northern part of San Francisco. And then there is Aloka Vihara, that are sisters who were trained in the Ajahn Chah Thai forest tradition as Siladaras first, and then they took Bhikkhuni ordination and they started their own monastery, and that's in Sacramento, close to Sacramento. Then there are some dear friends, Ayya Santusika and Ayya Chittananda, that have Karuna Vihara, that is also in that area close to San Jose. Then if you go further down in California, there is Mahapajapati Monastery that is run by a Burmese Bhikkhuni, Venerable Gunasari, and and she's awesome. So she's, I think, the only Bhikkhuni that I'm aware of, the only woman that I'm aware of that has full ordination, and who is from Burma, of course. Then there are several other Bhikkhuni monasteries spread throughout the country. So in Colorado, I forget to remember the name of the monastery, because I haven't been there, so I don't remember the name. And then of course there's Heartwood Refuge Monastery, that technically actually is a dual gender monastery like Empty Cloud, but it's predominantly Bhikkhunis ordained there. And it's run by my Samaneri preceptor, who is Venerable Panyavati. And then in Canada, even though it's not the US, I will include it anyway, there's one of my favorite monasteries run by Ayya Midanandi. And the name of the monastery is Sati Saranya. Soon we will be launching this map on the website where you can find all of these beautiful resources. And of course, I only mentioned the ones in the Theravada tradition, because if we get into the Mahayana tradition, actually the majority of the monasteries are run by Bhikkhunis. So there are too many, because there are more Bhikkhunis, especially in the Taiwanese tradition, than there are Bhikkhus. And Mark says, so what do you do in your practice when you see suffering, but there is nothing one can do or it's not appropriate? When you see suffering, but there is nothing one can do or is not appropriate. What do you mean by that? So are you talking about seeing my own suffering? So in my practice, when I'm dealing with my own suffering, but there's nothing that I can do, or are you talking about someone else's suffering and nothing that we can do, or it's not appropriate to help? If Mark, you can clarify a little bit what you mean by that would be great. And welcome to Alisa. Alisa says, how can someone find a spiritual teacher? Well, usually you go to a monastery and you find people who are interested in spirituality, and then you'll find someone who's ahead of you in the path. I really like the definition of teacher in Japanese Buddhism, which is sensei, which literally means ahead of us in the path. So it's not necessarily finding someone who's fully enlightened or that has everything fully developed or particularly incredible, but really just people who are ahead of us in the path, and we can learn from them. I really like Aya Suchita, senior monastic who lives at Damadarini Monastery, one of the monasteries that I mentioned earlier, and she said, there's never a bad teacher. Whenever you meet a monk, learn from both their good side and their bad sides. Learn what you want to become and learn what you do not want to become. They're never giving you a bad teaching. You can always have a good teaching. And Gita says, do you take turns cooking during the winter months? Yes, there are several different residents of the monastery, so not the one person will cook all the time. And actually, we're very lucky that a lot of people are offering food dana, so they are coming here and offering food that is already cooked, like it is traditional. So lots of people get turns to cook, both in the winter months and in the summer months and the spring and in the fall. But during the winter retreat, we will have, if that's what you're asking, because we're planning on going on in seclusion from Monday. I hope also from Monday, but from the beginning of January till the end of February. And we will have 2 months of entire seclusion. And during that time, there will be lay residents who will be supporting entirely the monastics. And Eleanor says, I don't understand what's wrong with music. I find music therapy very helpful. Music also helps me stop the stream of thoughts, stay present, and feel better. This seems pretty positive and beneficial, no? So it's not that there's something inherently evil in music, but rather so in practice. That's why we call it practice. So fundamentally, whenever we're practicing, we are taking on certain training rules. And as a lay person, I wouldn't, it really is up to you to understand at what level you feel comfortable to practice and what seems beneficial at this point in your life, in your practice. But it's highly recommended. So you'll see normally in Asian Buddhist cultures, the lay people will take what we call the 8 precepts, either every week or every other week or every 2 weeks. And that's definitely every 2 weeks is the Upasata. So that is a day, either a full moon day or a new moon day, and then the other 2 are the half moons that are quote unquote optional, in the way that it depends from practitioner to practitioner whether they want to follow the Upasata at that time as well. But definitely in the full moon and the new moon, one takes the 8 precepts for that day. And one of the precepts Actually, there is the precept of not eating after noon, and then there is the precept of abstaining from entertainment, which includes music, right? And so at that time, you're giving a break to your mind. You're training your mind to be content and happy unconditionally. So without anything that is outside, quote unquote, of yourself. So you said finding music therapy very helpful, and it helps you stop the stream of thoughts, stay present, and feel better. Right. So it is helping you right here, right now. But what happens when that music is not available? Right? You can't rely on the music to always be there. Perhaps your um, iPod, I don't think iPods are popular anymore. I think my technology is outdated, but whatever your music player, whatever sort it is, breaks. So you can't listen to any music. Or if you're listening to the radio, I don't know if people listen to the radio anymore. Wow, I'm getting old. But anyway, the electricity might go off. So you can't listen to it anymore. So then, how do you stop the stream of thoughts and how do you stay present and feel better? When you lose the source, the condition through which your peace was based upon. So that's why we train ourselves to abstain from music, to abstain from entertainment, to abstain from anything that is outside of ourselves, quote unquote. And in that way, we start getting closer and closer to unconditional happiness because we need to create the conditions for a happiness that is not reliable upon external circumstances. So that's why I'm saying that it's not that music is wrong or is devilish or it's an abomination. It isn't. It's just music. It is what it is. But it's not particularly helpful when we're trying to practice concentration, when we're trying to train the mind. Because in particular, music is one of the most powerful, actually, mediums that really attracts the mind, captures it, and then stays in the mind for long periods of time. So I wouldn't say that you should go cold turkey with it. So stop and throw all your records out and destroy all your MP3s or whatever. But rather, once again, start practicing periodically with the 8 precepts. Start taking the 8 precepts. This Sunday will be the Upasana. So it's a great opportunity to take the 8 precepts and practice this way. So abstaining entirely from entertainment. And then checking your mind and seeing what does the mind feel like? What are the problems, the issues, the hindrances that I'm experiencing? And then Eleanor says, when I focus on the breath, it calms my mind and body, but it's hard to stay focused for very long. Correct, yes. So it's a practice once again. That's great. It's great that you can actually focus even for a second. So no excellence can be acquired without constant practice. So keep on practicing. You are doing great. It's wonderful that you are being able to focus to begin with, and that it is calming your mind and body. And Gita says, are venerables allowed to leave the monastic life to care for one's sick parents and then return after? So normally we don't leave the monastic life. We stay as monks. I know actually several other venerables who have, taken some time off from the monastery and gone to spend some time with their parents. And of course, they don't just storm out of the monastery and then see you never, but rather they discuss it with the community, and usually the community is very supportive and understanding, and so um, everybody's in agreement, and then the venerable goes and stays as a venerable, stays in their monastic garb and takes care of the parents. And Mark says, continue concentration but leads to samadhi and possibly the first jhana, not necessarily enlightenment in my understanding. Mm-hmm. And Eleanor says, sorry, yes, I guess the question was too generic. What about someone tells a lie to X? Should we tell X that someone lied to him, her? Well, check your intentions there. So why would you tell the other person? Why would you tell X person that someone lied to them? What is your motivation? Are you trying to protect X person, or are you trying to shame the Y person who's telling a lie? So if it's for the welfare of X person, and you can't go to Y person, for example, and kind of admonish them first, you have to use your wisdom and see, is this for their welfare? Is this for my welfare? Is this for the welfare of myself and others? So ask yourself these questions, and then see if your intention is pure, if your intention is to help, and your intention is not to either gossip or take revenge on the other person, or whatever it is that can be. Then if it's truly helpful, then you can share the information. But what you should try and do beforehand, always though, is to try to bring the two people together at peace. So acting as someone who brings people together rather than separates people. This is what normally the Buddha advises us to do. And you say it's hard to know when to do something when we witness someone's wrongdoings. So go to that person and address that. Go, why are you behaving in this unwholesome way? Let's have a conversation together. Can I help you? And Gita says, if one has a very sick family member that one is looking after, can they practice within the lay life due to the circumstances? Once again, you need to use your own wisdom and your best judgment. Unfortunately, I can't make the decisions for you, nor can the Buddha. And also, there is no shame, first of all, in being a lay person. It's just a state of, it's just a form fundamentally. And so you can practice just as well as a lay person, and you can practice as a monastic if your intentions are pure, if your effort is good, is right. So yeah, if you're taking care of a sick family member, yes, taking care of them is an incredibly beautiful, wholesome act of generosity. And you can practice as a lay person if that is the most convenient form. And Elaine says, question from my daughter. It is my grandfather's karma that has him imprisoned in a 5x7 room in a nursing home inflicted by COVID. First of all, I'm sorry to hear that your grandfather is going through COVID, through this horrible disease. And on top of that, in a nursing home where it's very difficult to be right now during the pandemic, since it's one of the most the easiest place where the virus can go around. But we have to, getting to your question, a lot of times we start thinking about karma in this kind of judgment day. So it's not that karma is something, that replaces God, a God that decides this is good and this is bad, and I'll punish you arbitrarily. And it is their karma that they are experiencing all these bad things. So that is not a particularly constructive way of thinking. The reality is that we've all done incredibly horrible things in our past lives, and we've all done incredibly good things in our past lives. And there are certain causes and conditions that then trigger certain results to happen. So we all have the seeds, so to speak, but those seeds are only activated, only become plants when we also have a fertile soil and the moisture. So, to speak, we all have the karma of quote unquote being imprisoned in a 5x7 room in a nursing home inflicted by COVID. We all have that karma. So, we all have that seed. Whether it's activated or not depends on a lot of different factors. That actually, the Buddha says if you if you continue obsessing about these things, your head is going to explode because it's so complex. Only an enlightened being can fully understand the particular specific workings of these types of karma. So I wouldn't worry too much about these thoughts, because the reason why we're asking these questions are more like, oh, this person deserves that, or that person does not deserve that. What is more useful in the Buddha's discipline is thinking, how can I help people who are suffering? So how can I relieve my grandfather's suffering? What can I do to make him feel better? And if I can't help my grandfather, how can I help other people who are in the nursing home affected or not affected by COVID? A lot of people who are in nursing homes are experiencing extreme loneliness. And the last time we went a few weeks ago to the farmers market on alms rounds, there was a beautiful group of people that was actually had created this volunteer project of writing cards for the local people here in the nursing home, so to put a smile on their face and relieve them a little bit from the suffering. So that's more what we should be thinking. Those more are the terms, and not getting not going around with a judgmental mind, either for other people or for ourselves, but understanding that, once again, certain karmic conditions are activated. Certain karmic seeds are activated by the conditions. But we all have the same karmic seed, so to speak. All right. And 1 second. Hello, Andre. Good to see you. 1 second. This chat is going a little bit. Okay, there we go. And Robin says, what kinds of things are good to do for a person or animal who has died? Are there particular chants or other practices? Yes, absolutely. Well, here at the monastery, so if actually you're experiencing this and you want to, for the monastic Sangha to dedicate chanting for people or animals who have passed away, you're welcome to send us an email, and we'll be more than happy to do that. So we normally do the funeral chanting here at Empty Cloud Monastery. And other practices, well, usually it's beneficial to do some good deeds and share the merit with the people who have passed away, with the deceased. And that's basically double merit, because you're doing something wholesome that elates your mind, and on top of that, you're sharing it with people who you care about, wishing for them to have a good rebirth, wishing for them to be reborn in a place where they can have the presence of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, where they can have a guiding light of the Dhamma. And Jens says, can you relate your definition of Kalyanamitta? I ask because recently I heard a person state a person could only be a spiritual friend if he, she, they are a follower of the Theravada teaching. I felt this was a limiting definition. I always felt it is anyone, Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, who acts in a wholesome way, which supports our own wholesome actions and practices. Well, I find it quite amusing that the person said only a spiritual friend if they're a follower of the Theravada teachings. That's oddly specific. And actually, that's not the definition. That could not possibly be the definition that the Buddha gave, because there was no such thing as the Theravada tradition at the time of the Buddha. So fundamentally, I tend to agree with you that it's anyone who is cultivating the wholesome and supports our wholesome practice. So that's fundamentally why the Buddha said Kalyanamitta is the entire path. It is obvious that if the person in question is practicing the same path with us, then of course they will understand it fully and they will support it more fully. So I have lots of people from my previous life within this life that are not interested in Buddhism, but are extremely supportive of what I do. And they're definitely good friends. But I have a different relationship with them than I do with the venerables that I live with here at the monastery, or the Buddhist lay people that are here at the monastery or come to the monastery. So the latter are more supportive to my practice because we're all going in the same direction. We're all focused on developing the Noble Eightfold Path. So all the different elements that are included in the Noble Eightfold Path, which usually other traditions might not include every single element, right? So perhaps the focus will be a little bit different. This being said, they're incredible people, wholesome people, and they can definitely be of support to your spiritual practice. But I would say that someone who is fully committed to Buddhism then would be the exact definition of Kalyanamitta, of spiritual friend. And I see it very much here. Whenever, before actually ordaining as a monastic, I spent a month in Italy with a lot of friends, and it was great. I had a really good time. But I have to say that after a while, my attention started veering towards other things, simply because even though my friends are really good friends, they weren't fully engaged in the path, or at all. They were engaged in other things that might overlap here and there, but it wasn't fully the Buddhist path. I hope that answers your question. And Andre says, today I listened to an audiobook and they said sometimes when the monk in the forest would be overcome with fear in the forest, and to overcome their fear, they would open their mosquito net. and use all the methods they could to overcome their fear until they overcame or conquered their fear. Have you practiced similarly, or can you apply this type of tactic to your practice in the suburbs? Absolutely. So there's always an opportunity to face our defilements wherever we are. And there are different types of fear as well. So actually, having a female body, we're a lot more vulnerable than um, women are a lot more vulnerable since they're born than men, simply because they are perceived as more vulnerable and um, can be easily taken advantage of by stronger individuals. So that creates a certain tension that actually, personally, for example, I hadn't even realized the extent to which it was present in my mind, because that was the sort of natural state of being that I was born in. It was only when several years ago the Me Too movement happened that it actually triggered a question in my mind, which was, oh, why do I think that this is a normal state of being? Why do I think that actually going around at night, constantly wary of my surroundings, for example, is something normal, when the majority of men do not have that experience, are not afraid to go out in the dark, are not afraid to be alone on the street at a certain time of day or a certain time of night or in a particular neighborhood, right? So it was so ingrained, it was so normal that since I was basically born, that was taught to me, and that was how I was going about in the world once again. That I never even questioned that there could be someone who would have a different experience than myself. And that's basically living in a state of constant fear. So yes, there's fear of mosquitoes. I personally don't have fear of mosquitoes, even though actually they're the most deadly animals. Normally, we're more afraid of. So you probably heard of all the incredible stories of the Thai forest monks that are perhaps surrounded by tigers or by elephants or whatnot. But actually, um, the most dangerous animal is none of these two. It's actually it's the mosquito. Yet, at least we perceive it as more of as an annoying creature rather than as a sort of creature to be deadly afraid of. So, yeah, I mean, whether you're in a forest monastery, in a suburban monastery, or in a city, there's lots of different opportunities to watch the mind and look. Where are your hang-ups? What is creating anxiety? And what is the appropriate response to deal with it? So you don't have to necessarily be in the middle of the forest in Thailand, also because most of it has been um, eliminated, unfortunately, in the past decades. So there's very little forest left. But even there, that's not necessarily the only place where you'll be afraid. Being in the middle of New York City, people are afraid. Right before the election, the election day, they started shutting down all the stores, putting this kind of barricade of like wood because they were afraid of people rioting and destroying everything after the results of the election. or people can be threatened by white supremacists, or can be threatened by lots of people with lots of weird ideas, and that can create a constant state of panic. So, unfortunately, we cannot escape fear just by moving somewhere else. There is no shelter, there is no refuge from samsara. The only thing the only refuge, actually, it's not true there is no refuge. There is only one refuge, and it's Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, or there are three refuges, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. There you go, I'm correcting myself. But samsara is not a refuge, it's not a place of safety. So you have to see yourself, what are your hang-ups, once again, and what is the best way to deal with it in accordance with Dhamma. Then Mark says, others suffering and inappropriate, like a parent in a story using harsh words or actions on a child. Let me see what your question was again. I don't remember. So what do you do in your practice when you see suffering, but there is nothing one can do, or it's not appropriate? And your example was others suffering and inappropriate, like a parent in a story using harsh words or actions on a child. So it's very important not to add suffering to the world. So once again, getting back to the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is that there is suffering, acknowledging that that is what there is. And a lot of time, whenever we face suffering, whether it's ourselves or others, we either start feeling sorry for ourselves, or we start feeling sorry for others. And as the Buddha says, we start stabbing ourselves over and over again. So it's like being hit with a dart. So then what do? We take another dart and we stab ourselves. Well, that's not very useful. We're trying to transcend suffering, and instead we create more suffering. That doesn't sound very wise, does it? So with all of these questions, when we go and we deal with others, there always have to be two things. One, the intention to release the suffering, the intention to help others, the intention to cultivate compassion and consideration. But at the same time, the understanding that a lot of times we won't be able to do anything about it. And it's the nature of samsara to be in that way, to be full of greed, hatred, and delusion. So if you see a parent in a story using harsh words or actions on a child, well, it depends to what degree this is happening. What is the degree? And I can't tell you exactly, like, once again, one size fits all answer. You have to understand, with the wisdom that you have cultivated, right now it's appropriate to say something, do something, or in this circumstance, it's not appropriate to intervene. Also, considering that we are deluded, reflecting that just like the parent in the story, you might be seeing only one sort of fragment of their life. The fragment where they're using harsh words on the child, but you don't know what happened beforehand, and you don't know what will happen later. So it's very likely that we can create a whole movie, a whole idea of what is going on that might not be matching with reality. So we have to be quite humble here and understand that we're not impeccable ourselves. But then, of course, if you're seeing someone who's beating up a child or beating up anyone on the street, then it's appropriate to do something. Minimum is to ask for help. But someone just reprimanding their child, perhaps, it is what it is. Maybe they're not using the particular tone of voice that you like or you prefer, but they might be going through a lot of different issues themselves. So having a stranger coming up to them and reprimanding them might not be exactly the most useful thing for them there. All right, and I hope that was helpful. And Kita says, that is wonderful that the lay followers get the opportunity to cook and bring food. Yes, absolutely. And Eleanor says that, thank you. Yes, it makes sense. Music might be like a crutch. Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's a very good good analogy. So we're trying to get rid of all the crutches so that we can walk naturally by ourselves. And Gita says, yeah, in the Mahayana tradition, they have sutta music chanting with instruments. It's very beautiful to listen if one enjoys music. That is very true. Thank you for mentioning it. But it's also true that it's, since it has developed over millennia, it is full of dharma. So it's not something that is invasive to the mind. It's actually supportive to dharma practice. So that is definitely a good suggestion. And I think that Bhante Sudazo had already suggested that to Eleanor to explore the Mahayana chanting, that they have instruments and whatnot. So that could be a nice transition, perhaps. And Bhante Indra Ratana has fantastic chanting music on the suttas. Really wonderful to listen. Oh, I did not know. Let me put it in a note because I want to check it out. All right. And Eleanor says, what is the most challenging for you when dealing with your sickness? How are you handling sickness differently now than before you become a monk? The most difficult thing that I'm dealing with, well, I'm very attached to health. That is my hindrance. So most of my life, I had almost perfect health, so no problem, no major problem. Also with my teeth, never had a cavity, for example. Like no real problem, no real issue. So I guess now as I'm aging and lots of different changes and shifts in life, bunch of different ailments are happening because, of course, this body is of the nature to get ill and to get sick. So it's more, the struggle is, there are two struggles. One, I'm not used to not being able to use mental functions the way that I used to be able to. I hope it will change, but see, that's the problem. I hope it will change. So in reality, the biggest struggle is a mental struggle. The biggest struggle is not being able to accept that perhaps this brain fog is never going to leave, that I will always have this kind of confusional state, perhaps. And that's because it's part of the deterioration of the body, deterioration of the brain that then also affects the mind. So that's the most challenging thing. But how are you handling sickness differently now? Well, before, first of all, I would not understand any I wouldn't understand the real source of suffering. So I wouldn't understand that the suffering is actually caused by the desire, by my wanting for it to be in a different way, for me wanting for the body to be healthy, for me wanting the body to be reliable, all things that it can't be by its nature. But now, because I have the Buddhist teachings, I can practice equanimity while experiencing all of these both bodily feelings, bodily sensations, but also mental emotions and mental feelings. Um, so in the past, I would have just stabbed myself over and over again and gone, oh, poor me, oh, this is so terrible. And then I would have gotten really angry at the medical system in the United States that they can't figure out why I'm sick. And if only I could go to Italy and the good doctors are there and they would actually be able to figure out what's wrong with me. And there's also free healthcare and blah, 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 blah. So I would probably go on a very long rant. But now I don't. I catch myself before going on that rant and go, well, in reality, it's just the nature of this body. And you need to understand the nature of this body. Understand the nature, the characteristic of being sick. And Jan says, thank you. Hearing the difference between a good friend and spiritual friend was very helpful. Made a lot of sense. Oh, yeah. I like how you phrased it. The difference between a good friend and a spiritual friend. Yeah, that's exactly it. This being said, I don't think that a spiritual friend necessarily has to be of the Theravada tradition. I want to specify that. But they have to be a committed Buddhist practitioner. And Andre says, whenever you remember the fact that you have brain fog, does a pleasant feeling arise? And when I mentioned you practice in a Sugurian monastery, did a pleasant feeling arise? Do these feelings keep changing? And are they yourself if they disappear and you're still here? It's a lot of questions. All right, so whenever you remember the fact that you have brain fog, does a pleasant feeling arise? Actually, I would say that it's a neutral feeling when I remember it. But when brain fog appears in and of itself, yes, it's an unpleasant feeling. So the brain fog is perceived as unpleasant. The recollection of the brain fog is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. When you mentioned I practice in a suburban monastery, I was very amused. I just find it amusing for some reason, a suburban monastery. And yeah, so I guess the feelings keep changing because I don't remember if it was pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, so to speak. And of course, they're not myself. They are not mine. They're not who I am. So everything is constantly changing. And this is actually one of the greatest gifts of being sick, is that we can notice in every moment how there's so many feelings that we're experiencing, and all of these feelings are constantly changing, are impermanent. So we see them arising and we see them persisting, and then we see them ceasing. And we see how we have no power over them. I can't, for example, right now decide, bam, brain fog, disappear. No, it's not in my power. And why is that not in my power? Because it's not mine. It's not me. It's not who I am. It's the same as Times Square, New York City. I can't decide right now, may New York City disappear. It's not me, it's not mine, it doesn't belong to me. So we tend to, when we start reflecting, looking at our mind, we see how anything that is close, that becomes closer to us, we have this sense of possession, we have this sense of ownership. And that is the product of delusion. It's delusion that makes me think that this is mine. It's delusion makes me think this is mine and this is me, this is who I am. It's delusion that makes me think that this will be permanent. And then when it shows its nature of impermanence, then we get all shaken up, right? And Eleanor says, I used to enjoy saying thank you to God, Jesus, when I was Christian. How can I do that in Buddhism? By just feeling grateful inside? Can I say thank you to the Buddha? I guess, how do you say that? Grazie a Dio, okay. Oh, thanks to God I did this, or thanks to God I did that. Well, I'd say that it's always good to practice gratitude and being grateful. So, first of all, in Buddhism, perhaps we don't really ask the Buddha for favors. So, if we're like looking for a promotion or whatnot, we don't like pray to the Buddha, oh, Buddha, please give me a promotion at work. That's not really what the Buddha is there for. But there are a lot of different bodhisattvas, which are not terribly different. I believe that you're French, so you're probably familiar with the Catholic tradition, just like myself. So there's lots of different saints and, lots of different people in the Catholic tradition that you can rely to and ask them for favors. So if you go to any Mahayana temple, for example, you'll see lots of people asking or praying, actually, you can say, not terribly different from any form of religion, praying, asking, wishing for things to happen. Guanyin Bodhisattva is very similar to Mother Mary, in the ways that people relate to her. So in Italy, actually, we say in a lot of different places, people have their favorite saints. So they will thank either a particular Madonna or a particular saint. So you can say thanks to Jesus Bodhisattva, or thanks to Guanyin Bodhisattva, or whoever you feel more close to or gravitating towards. But then there's always the opportunity to be grateful, regardless of whether things, whether we're acquiring things or not acquiring things, so to speak. Very grateful to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, the triple gem. So the ability of taking refuge and having these teachings that help us relieve suffering. So that is the most supreme practice of gratitude, I would say, and I highly recommend that. I am so grateful for the Buddha, and I'm so grateful for all the monastics who have taught me the path of the Buddha, and I'm so grateful for the monastics who have ordained me. So grateful to have been able to join the Sangha. So there are incredible opportunities to practice gratitude. Oh, good to see you, Jen. Welcome. All right. So I think that's all for this evening, since I don't see any other questions unless a last-minute question pops up. Thank you all, friends, for joining this evening and for asking all these questions. And thank you, Gita, for the sweet wishes. Likewise, I will say. And next week, we'll be meeting again online at 8 a.m. and then 7:30 p.m. New York City time. And there will be all the different venerables. We have a new venerable, actually, Venerable Santi, who has joined this community. He's coming from Temple Forest Monastery, beautiful monastery in New Hampshire, and he's staying with us for a while. So he will be sharing some words of Dhamma next week. So a lot to look forward to. All right, so we can end the evening with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have a great weekend. Ooh. And Jen is saying, will you guys be holding live precepts Sunday for the Upasata? We won't because actually all the other venerables are on retreat and I will be joining them in the morning. So we'll be on retreat until Wednesday. So no live streams, no technology until then. All right. Okay. Have a great rest of the week.